Well, Fred, this episode, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some books that I've read and information. When I write my books, I do a lot of research, and I'm reading like a book a week, a book every 2 weeks. So I really want to hit on these so then I can either take them and throw them in our raffle basket or sell them at our conference coming up in Philly and Pittsburgh shortly. But an interesting thing happened. I got a phone call, it was an email from a woman in Butler, and she's right near the Butler conference, 2 blocks away. And she says, I have all these UFO books, I want to donate them to Pennsylvania MUFON. So I said to her, why don't you give it to the Butler conference? They're right next to you. And she goes, no, I want to give them to you. She said that she was a member of that group, Boru, and she said, she wanted them to become a MUFON chapter. And it never happened, and they just stayed as their own little group. So she said, I'm not giving them the books. So I drove out there, and it was right near the center where we do their conference, 2 blocks away. And she gave me 3 big plastic tubs full of books, 111 UFO books. Wow. And they were in pristine, they looked brand new. Like my new book here, they look brand new. So I'm going to give you some, and some we're going to sell at the Greensburg and the Philly conference. But here's a couple right now I just want to give you so you can get started on some of your reading. Since you're into Bigfoot, here's one, Monsters Among Us, and there's a Bigfoot on the cover. Oh, okay. Here's another one, well, it just says Bigfoot as the name, so you could have that one. And then this one, obviously, since you're the West Virginia MUFON State Director, this one is West Virginia UFOs, Close Encounters in the Mountain State by Bob Tietz. Now, who is Bob Tietz? I've heard that name.
Bob used to be one of the state directors down in West Virginia for a few years down there. And my understanding, he got some good cases in there.
Oh, it's a very good book. I thumbed through it.
Allegedly one case in here about graveyards. He got in here, I forget the name of the place, it's in here somewhere. And then, every time somebody was buried, within 2 days a UFO would come there, hover over top of the freshly dug grave, and the light would go into the ground. They even had a pastor see this. And they wanted to dig the body up, but they wouldn't let them do it. But the thing is, they're saying, were they actually taking out chips that were in the people? Or back in the 50s and 60s, if you remember the Men in Black, they actually had on clothing that could be from a grave.
Well, they look like people. Undertakers, don't they? They're dressed in black.
So were they actually, and their faces was all painted up, and I mean, this and that. So were they actually taking the bodies out of there?
And reanimating them?
Reanimating and making them the Men in Black.
I never thought about that.
And a lot of people say they really think this is what was happening back then.
That's amazing. Did Bob Tietz have any other involvement? Didn't you say Ray Keller and Tietz, the guy who was a guest a couple of months ago here, that they did something together? No,
Tietz, Keller knows his wife. His wife runs the book company. When he was he had the newsletter. He had the newsletter for about 2 years. But my understanding, I was trying to get a hold of him, and a couple of people told me that him and 2 other guys had a case. Nobody will talk about the case. But anyhow, they had a case, and they went up to Washington, D.C. about it. And when they came back, they never talked about UFOs again. They just forgot about it.
Really? Was that with Project Blue Book? Was it that far back?
They didn't
so they went to D.C., they came back, and they left the UFO field?
Right, altogether.
What is that?
Nobody knows where Tietz is. Tietz is down there, but nobody.
So
won't talk to
he went from. Was he a MUFON State Director?
Yeah.
He was the MUFON State Director for West Virginia. Had an encounter with the government over a UFO case, and resigned, and no longer speaks about UFOs.
That's what they say. I don't know. This is all hearsay. But
obviously, a lot to that story.
I mean, after he wrote a couple books, he wrote the one book about the mental. I think you got it.
Yeah.
And his thing was about the mental thing with UFOs and people. And I mean, like I say, all of a sudden you can't get a hold of him. I mean,
this whole field, even the demonology that I've looked into the last 2 years, you can't figure it out. You can't explain it. It's like it's beyond us. and we're these pawns. You know, we're being manipulated, and there are these more powerful entities out there that and you try every time you think you got it figured out, something else and it doesn't make sense. You know.
You know, it's like you say that. Okay, you know, the new thing I'm doing here with all these cases and that, they got now from 1995 till now, they've actually had 61 ghost cases in MUFON.
Okay.
Now, the thing is, say for example, you're abducted, and you go up, you see your grandmother, your grandfather, your brother, your sister, your mother. Is that really them? Or is that an alien taking their form?
Well, yeah.
So, again, now, who is it? I mean, are aliens and ghosts all from the same tree?
Well, I've read a number of books, and it's funny, I never gave this any thought until the last 2 years, but I come across it in book after book after book, where they talk about the alien and the demonic and the ghosts is all being similar. You know, and I told you I had that, you know, when I got into this, I was talking at a Rotary group, and this one girl came up to me, and that's exactly what she said. She saw her dead mother covered in blood saying, help me,
right.
and she invited her in.
Right.
Now she can't get her out.
Right,
and there are entities in her house. And she says, John, they'll be going to bed, and over the bedroom door, you'll see the fingers come over with long nails. That's a demonic entity.
Right.
You know, in that case, I would say it's not alien, you know, but that's the stuff that happens. And I think there's a huge overlap, and nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to hear this.
Well, because they want everything peaches and cream. I mean, you know.
Well, the other thing, too, is think about it. You have something happen at night.
Right.
Now, first of all, it's not going to be accepted either way, but if you say it was an alien abduction and they're here to help, they're going to clean up the environment, they're going to cure diseases, that's accepted, right? Oh, good guys, brother aliens.
Oh.
What if you say, yeah, it was a demonic entity, a demon? You know what that means? It means you did something wrong.
Right.
It means what happened in my house, I did something wrong to bring a demon in. That's not true. That's not it. That's not why they single you out.
But I think that if you look back, I don't know if you ever read the thing from the FBI where they said that UFOs were interdimensional.
No, I didn't read that one.
Okay, they said back in 1947, I didn't bring it, but I got it home. The UFOs are actually interdimensional craft. All right. So now, if they're interdimensional craft, that means that aliens are interdimensional.
I agree.
Okay, that means the ghosts might be interdimensional, which they are if they can come and go.
And the demons
the same
absolutely
thing with this guy
are.
right here, Bigfoot. Okay, now, what are they? I mean, to me, it's like there's a little party. Like you got the good and you got the bad, and they're playing us from all sides.
Yeah, they are.
And you know, we're stupid, the majority of people, and they just go along with the program. I believe, again, the government.
They know.
They know, and they are actually part of it. I believe there's actually aliens running the government.
Well, that Collins elite that Nick Redfern talked about, and there's a chapter in my book on the Collins elite, that tells you the government is right mixed up, and they're trying to actually outsmart these entities and use them as a weapon.
Well, I think the entities are actually there.
They could
I think they're working with them 100%.
Yeah, well,
they may even be running parts of the government.
That's what David Icke says, and that is so scary because you see the manipulation out right now in the presidential election, the huge amount of manipulation through the media, through Facebook, through Google. They're doing everything possible to undermine Donald Trump.
Right.
You know, whether you like him or don't like him, you have to see what's going on. We don't have a free system of elections right here. When you see how even the commentators are against him when they do the questioning. It's incredible what's going on.
But see, again, Donald Trump, if he gets in, I'm going to be very honest and blunt here. I think if he gets in, he's done.
And Pence is going to be president. I agree with you.
He's walking on eggshells right now.
That wouldn't surprise me one bit.
I do believe that when Hillary ran against Barack Obama, Barney and Betty's kid, was real quick. When I was down at the Mothman, I gave the presentation on UFOs down there. And we talked about Barney and Betty. It was packed. And I said, well, you know who Barney and Betty's kid is, don't you? And everybody said, who? And I said, Barack Obama. And a couple of people said, my God, he does look like him. You know?
I couldn't stop laughing when you said that a year ago.
But
I even put that in my book.
But you know, you look at it, and what the hell was I going to say?
All right. Well, let's.
Okay, I'll think about it.
Let's go on to this stuff here, because I've been carrying these books with me for like 4 months. The first thing I want to say to the viewers is, if you subscribe to the MUFON Journal, it's a monthly magazine, and it's pretty good. And I wrote an article, and I just want to hit on it briefly. It's looking back at anniversaries. So this is my research, and I'm talking about the year 2016. So 30 years ago in 1936, in the Black Forest, you had a UFO crash, and that was the prelude to the Haunebu Nazi craft and the Bell Project. 50 years ago in 1966, and we've talked about this, we've done shows on it, you had the case in Michigan, 7 police officers, 100 witnesses. That was the swamp gas case with Hynek. Also in 1966, you had the Portage, Ohio case with the 5 police officers. You had Presque Island with a Bigfoot entity and 5 witnesses. You had the Dr. Robert Lowe memo from Project Blue Book to the Condon Committee, where he said we were going to trick the public into believing we were actually investigating this. And you had, in September of '66, Star Trek debuted. And at the end of '66 was the first Mothman sighting. So '66 was a huge year for activity. 40 years ago in '76, we had the Allagash, Maine incident with 4 men that were camping, and then you had the Iranian incident in Tehran with the pilot and the UFO. 30 years ago, you had a 7-foot red orb crash into Height 611 in Russia, and when they went there, there was all these metallic balls and black chemical in the crash area. So they think that was some sort of a UFO, some sort of a craft. Then you had the Japan Airlines incident over Alaska. 20 years ago, you had the Varginha, Brazil incident, where it was the start of the chupacabras, where they saw those creatures that were red and they had little horns on their head, and they actually stoned one to death. The cop that picked him up, the military officer, Marco Cheriz, died a couple of days after handling the body. And 10 years ago, we had the O'Hare incident in Chicago, and 12 airport employees had seen this UFO activity. So good stuff in here. You got to write an article on the Bigfoot entity stuff now, because I put something in here almost every month to our magazine, so it would be good if you started doing that. Okay, I want to hit on a couple of books. And this first one, this is interesting. I don't know if you're interested in the hollow earth theory. If you're interested in that. This one is called Subterranean Worlds by Walter Minkle. I think it was in 1986 or 89 he wrote this book. But I'm just going to read the chapters. I had no idea the hollow earth theory was so complex and so many different books and things have been written about it. I thought it was just 1 or 2 authors, and and that was that. But just to give you a feel for what this guy talks about, he talks about the Mother Earth theory, giving birth to life. He's kind of not a god, let's say. It's Mother Earth. He talks the next chapter: fairies, dwarfs, gnomes, mind spirits, giant serpents, and other beings that dwell under the ground. Then he talks about how the hollow earth theory began, and he's very detailed. I'm amazed at how detailed he is in this book. He talks about the father of the hollow earth theory, John Cleves, out of Sims, Ohio. Right here in Ohio is where it started. Then he talks about theorists who believe that the inner earth might become America's new colonial empire, is going into the inner earth because there's a whole world below us. This next author talks about the earth being concave, and when we look up at the sky, we're actually in the earth looking up at the crust from the inside. And there was actually someone else who published a book. It was more of a demonic book. It had the earth, it had the United States as the cover, but from in reverse, where the East Coast is in the west and California's in the east, because you're looking up at it, so it's in reverse. It's kind of creative, Then you have the Shaver mystery that he talks a lot about. That was Ray Palmer, who started Amazing Stories and later started Fate magazine. And it was in the 1940s where the Shaver mystery was all about these creatures from under the earth. The interesting thing is, Amazing Stories had, when they were publishing the Shaver mystery, they were publishing 185,000 issues a month. Now think about that. MUFON publishes 4,000. Fate magazine tells me they publish 6,000, 7,000. I don't believe that they do. I think it's less. So between Fate magazine today and MUFON today, you probably in the 10 to 12,000 copies, no less than that, 10,000 per month. They used to publish 185,000 copies a month of Amazing Stories. So somebody has killed this whole genre, and I think it's the CIA.
But you look, last month, what was Sims talking about? He was out there on the Indian reservation? About the little people he was out there looking for?
Yeah, that all falls in with this.
Underground.
It's amazing, this stuff. Then the next one is how humanity fought a horrible war with a race of serpents under Antarctica. I mean, I never heard of any of this stuff. The next chapter is about an enormous empire beneath Central Asia. Then they talk about the Nazis, and which we've talked about, and the Vril and the Thule Society. And then how the hollow earth idea has influenced science fiction writers. You know, so take this if you want it. If you don't want it, we'll put it in the raffle basket.
I'd like to read this one.
But it's very detailed. It was actually almost like reading a scientific manual. Very, very detailed, that book. All right, let's cover a few other things. This book here by Jenny Randles, she wrote, called Alien Contact, the First 50 Years. So it's 1947 to 1997. And what I found interesting in this book is if you look at it, she goes year by year, but she gives each year a title as far as what was going on. So 47 was the aliens arrive. Then there's the crash landing chapter, secret invasion. It's almost like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, right? Little Green Men, The Men in Black is 1953. We Are Not Alone. 1979 is Angels or Demons. Talking about the aliens, right? So the religious thing starts to come in now in the 80s and 90s. The Oz factor, which is these out-of-body experiences, alter states. Then you get the Star Children, the bad aliens. That's in '86 because it changed, and we've said that. The abductions used to be a guy in a suit in a small craft that would abduct you, and then it became these things in the corner of your bedroom at 3 in the morning. There's something not right about that, and I don't think it's alien. And then they talk about being under the influence. But I want to just read to you a couple of things she says in her introduction, and we'll call it, that's it for this book. The book really talks about trends and patterns. Did we capture a craft, or are these stories invented to confuse us about the real motivation of what's going on with UFOs, right? Do novels, television, movies, do they imitate the UFOs, or do they stimulate the reports and create the reports? Right? And then it answers, then they go into, is the answer in your subconscious? I don't believe this is something sick people are making up. It's not. It can be put in your mind, but it's not a mental illness. And I think some people in mental hospitals shouldn't be there. And seriously, just think about this. What if all of those crazy people that are in the hospitals are the ones who know the truth because their minds are still in contact with these other dimensions? Mentally challenged. Yeah, I don't want to be, I have to be politically correct.
Right.
Okay, are the aliens the space age equivalent of demons? That now we just call them aliens, right?
So getting back to your thing about the mentally challenged, isn't it possible that they put them in there so that they don't talk?
Yes.
They're not really mentally challenged. They know something. It's like when you got one of the lone gunmen that lived.
Yeah.
Nobody ever talks to him again.
Well, I read, I think it was the book by Malachi Martin on exorcism, and he actually says, if you put somebody in a mental hospital and you give them the medications and they don't get better, there's another problem.
Right.
And he believes then, after the medication, those people should undergo an exorcism. And he firmly believes a certain percentage of those people, once you exorcise the demon out, we'll be back to being normal.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't that's such a crazy thought that, well, they just want to hurt people, the demonic. So they got you now for life. You're in the mental hospital tied down, and the demon's doing whatever it can to you and destroying you, and that's what they, and there's nothing you can do about it. That's so sad. That's worse than slavery. That's so sad that could happen to somebody, Then it talks about, do they rule a planet that our arrogance calls our own, but it's not our own? Is our consciousness not sufficiently advanced to understand them? Most astronomers believe that life out in space is a certainty. If we want to test secret aircraft, the UFO phenomenon provides a perfect smokescreen. So she goes into, and when she tells you each year of what happened, she also tells you what was happening in the news with the space program, television, and other stuff. It was actually an interesting book, and James Krug, who was here a couple episodes ago on the moon structures, he said he read that and he liked it. Let me read a couple of quotes out of my book, UFOs Out of Pennsylvania, because there's a couple of things here we didn't get to. It's in the beginning, and I think they were pretty interesting. One is I found a letter from Professor Lawrence Merrick, and he talks about what Kennedy would have said regarding the aliens, right? So I'm just going to read a little bit to you. He says this would be his speech to America when they're ready to disclose, right? President Kennedy, and he believes Kennedy was going to say this, Kennedy would have said, "My fellow Americans, people of the world, today we set forth on a journey into a new era, one age. The childhood of mankind is ending, and another age is about to begin. The journey of which I speak is full of unknowable challenges, but I believe that all our yesterdays, all the struggles of the past have uniquely prepared our generation to prevail. Citizens of this earth, we are not alone. God, in his infinite wisdom, has seen fit to populate his universe with other beings, intelligent creatures such as ourselves. How can I state this with such authority? In the year 1947, our military forces recovered from the dry New Mexico desert the remains of an aircraft of unknown origin. Science soon determined that this vehicle came from the far reaches of outer space. Since that time, our government has made contact with the creators of the spacecraft. Though this news may sound fantastic and indeed terrifying, I ask that you not greet it with undue fear or pessimism. I assure you, as your president, that these beings mean no harm. Now, I don't agree with this no harm thing, and when you read that, what it reminds me of is Serpo, the story that Kennedy, that in the Roswell crash was a communication device, that they were able to actually get it to work. They made contact with the planet Serpo, and it took whatever 10 years. In 1964, they actually came while he died in 63. Yeah, but I think maybe it was 62 that they came, and we did an exchange program. So that could be what he's referring to as this contact that was going to be made, because it took about 10 years between the contact and them to arrive. And that could be that. Another thing I put in here was some quotes by Michael Cremo, who wrote a book called Human De-Evolution, all right? So what he said is, scientists have proposed making huge mirrors or lasers as a means of signaling extraterrestrial life. So since it goes the speed of light, the fastest way to do it is to shoot a laser. I don't think the laser will go far enough. I think it just peters out at a certain time.
Well, the one we don't know what they have.
Yeah, but I mean our lasers. Yeah. But could a laser actually go to the end of the universe? I don't know. I think it breaks up at some point. Just like the radio signals they send out turn to white noise at a certain distance. They don't go forever, Then he says the existence of extraterrestrials, human-like entities, is damaging to Darwin's theory of evolution. The probability is zero that our genes would change in the same way and be selected in the same sequence as in man's evolution. If we ran the tape of evolution again, it is impossible that human beings would result unless they evolved elsewhere and this planet was seeded. So basically what he's saying is the evolution on every planet, if that's how it's done, they will not look like us. They'll be different looking. Every species, every planet has to be different looking. And that if we got wiped out and evolution started again, we wouldn't look like us.
Right,
We'd look like something else, you know? Then he says the UFO phenomenon represents evidence for other dimensions beyond space and time. The UFOs may not come from ordinary space, but from a multiverse. The phenomenon constitutes a multifaceted continuum of experience with the belief in fairies, demons, angels, ghosts, apparitions, unmarked helicopters in association with unknown aerial phenomenon. So again, you keep running into these authors like Vallée, John Keel, Michael Cremo. They understand that there's something else going on here other than a craft flying here from space. That's not what it is. I don't believe it is.
But the black helicopters, again, they come in and play quite a bit.
Yeah.
With this stuff. So they really, like you say, are they really black helicopters, or are they them or they us?
That could be an alien flying a helicopter that's actually their craft, or, you know, they're working in concert with it. This last one I want to cover here is by William Cooper, Behold the Pale Horse. He was a radical, and they killed him. They shot him and they killed him. The sheriff did.
It was a setup.
Setup, absolutely. What he says, get this, were you in Vietnam?
No.
Okay. It says, the whole time I was in Vietnam, and especially on the DMZ, I had noticed that there was a lot of UFO activity. UFOs, I was told, was sensitive information. I learned exactly how sensitive when an entire village disappeared after a UFO was seen hovering over the huts. I learned that both sides had fired on the UFO and they blasted back with a blue light weapon. Rumors floated that UFOs had kidnapped and mutilated 2 Army soldiers and dropped them in the bush. No one knew how much of this was true, but the fact that the rumors persisted made me think about whether it was true. Then he says, President Kennedy discovered portions of the truth and intended to reveal it to the public. His assassination was ordered and carried out by the Secret Service. He says, watch the driver, William Greeley. That's who shot Kennedy. And then the last thing he said was, people who do not use their intelligence are no better than animals who do not have intelligence. That's our show for this week, Fred, and we will be back for another one. Thank you.